Where am I at? Where am I at? Huh? Wrong! That's an imposter. Hey friends, Ash here. Welcome back to Gents. Hope you're doing well. A little while back, I asked you guys on the community tab of my YouTube channel, what are the most groundbreaking fragrances of all time? We're talking game-changing Hall of Fame fragrances, like some of the ones that just changed the landscape forever. And you guys have voted, you have commented, and I have 10 of your top vote getters here today. So these are big boys. These are super important fragrances. You need to know these. If you don't, you need to learn them. I'm not gonna say I'm disappointed in you, because I'm not, but you need to know these, okay? It's homework. As always, they're gonna be linked down in the description below, so feel free to check them out down there. Feel free to use these codes as well for 10 to 20% off your order at a bunch of different websites. And Max Aroma has that new code GENTS20 for 20% off. So try that one first if GENTS20 doesn't work, because it works with most everything on Max Aroma's website, but some stuff it doesn't. If it doesn't work, use GENTS10, but try GENTS20 first. And before we do the first one here, I gotta say a special shout out to Sir Siage Sniffington. He had a really good one, but it's just Sir Siage Sniffington. You're in every one of these videos, man. You're always so quick on the trigger with a good answer. It gets upvoted to the top. I'm not letting you be in this one, except for I just gave you a shout out, so you're already in this one. And I have another one of these up on the community tab, so feel free to go on there, leave your answer, upvote other answers. That way you can be in a future video as well. So do one of these every week or two. All right, first up we have Canpo, or is it Conpo, who says, maybe not everyone's taste, but Le Male has to be up there. It flipped tradition on its head and unlocked a new territory for perfumers to explore. Now this was one of the top vote getters. It was mentioned multiple times, and most of the times that it was mentioned, it got a good amount of votes. So I'd say if you added up all of the votes across all the different comments, this was probably the one that was mentioned the most often, which would make Le Male, or Le Male, the #1 biggest groundbreaking fragrance for men of all time, the biggest game changer? Interesting. Maybe I wouldn't have gone with this one personally as like the biggest of all time, but top 10, yeah, I could see that, pretty easy. Part of me wonders if it's not like getting more of a push because of the success of the last couple flankers. You know, Le Male Elixir, Le Male Parfum, those fragrances, they are extremely popular, really well done, just fantastic scents. So maybe those are like helping propel this one a little bit, I don't know. Now for me on a personal level, I'm not gonna rock the original one anymore, but will I give it its credit, give it its due? Absolutely. Big time game changer. And for what it's worth, this powdery boy right here, big compliment getter. That's one of the reasons it took off so much. That's one of the reasons that there are untold numbers of flankers of this one nowadays. Up next we have Waleed5744, who says, Spicebomb Extreme, for sure. You couldn't compare it with other fragrances. It was such a unique composition of different spices that wasn't done before. Not that I dislike your choice here, but it is intriguing that you say Spicebomb Extreme, a composition of different spices that was never done before. Except Spicebomb, the original that came out before this one. So unique. Where have I smelled this before? Oh yeah, the first one. So while Spicebomb Extreme is more popular, especially in the fragrance community, than the original Spicebomb, and while I do think it's a better release than the original Spicebomb, I would wager that the original Spicebomb maybe would be the one that you'd want to put in here if you're going to use this DNA as like a game changer. Regardless of all that though, it is a wonderful scent, great performance, another one that's big on compliments, really nice for fall and winter time. And yeah, I think the added vanilla, the bit of smoothness that you have to the spiciness off the top, you know, little less aggressive than the original off the top, I think makes it more wearable and overall a better scent. Mike Kirby 2085 is up next, and he says something like CK1 being marketed as unisex while not smelling like anything out at the time. It was a game changer back in the day and everyone wore it. At that point, CK was like obsession, escape, and eternity. So I guess you're saying that Calvin Klein at the time this was released was about obsession, escape, and eternity. Like that's what everyone associated Calvin Klein with, and then this shook up how people viewed Calvin Klein. Now Mike does touch on something here. If you weren't into fragrances or wearing fragrances, or maybe you were too young, or maybe you weren't born yet when CK1 came out, you may not understand like how impressive this one was. When this came out, it took over. It just like ran roughshod over the fragrance landscape. Like Mike said, everybody was wearing this, everybody. Like legitimately, you could not escape CK1. This stuff was almost like freaking Sauvage nowadays. So a lot of people who weren't around when CK1 was doing that, when it was just, you know, taking over, they'll view this as some generic, soapy, clean fragrance that's, you know, 15 to 20 bucks, so who cares? But at one point in time, this one peaked, and when it peaked, you had to get out of the way. And yeah, I agree, this is a game changer. This one shook things up. This one presented itself as a unisex fragrance that was made for everybody, and everybody wore it. Nowadays, it's much more acceptable to have a fragrance come out and be considered unisex, and everybody wears it, and it's all good. When CK1 came out, fragrances weren't anywhere near as big as they are nowadays, especially for men. And so it was a different kind of approach, and it worked. Noel Rodriguez 6625 is up next, who says, I gotta give it to Dior Homme, the original. I have to specify now because there's Dior Homme 2020. I like. Back when it brought Iris to the forefront, it's because of that heavy use on a floral with a feminine luxury edge. I feel that it has opened up new territory on how a masculine person could smell. Between Valentino Uomo, Prada L'Homme, Givenchy Gentleman, and now even Armani Code and Ralph's Club, Iris is being used in more men's perfumery. Yes, Iris is definitely being used more often nowadays, and yes, when Dior Homme came out, it was more of a, I don't want to say novelty, but more of a unique kind of take on men's fragrances, that introduction of Iris as a focal point of the fragrance. Nowadays, there are Iris fragrances everywhere. Both makeup-y Iris, soapy Iris, powdery Iris, sweet Iris, creamy Iris, blue Iris, just all kinds of Iris. But when Dior Homme dropped, it was not quite so common. Interestingly enough, Dior Homme, when this first came out, a lot of people were iffy on, not talking about the fragrance community, as it were, but just your average guy. Which makes sense, because when you smell this, like if you had never smelled this before and all those Iris fragrances I mentioned didn't exist, this just came out, you would be like, what is this? And for a lot of people, that would just make it extremely intriguing and you would want it, and other people would be like, nah man, I'll stick with what I know. And with how Iris has proliferated, yeah, a bit of a game changer. Christian Fraser, 6202 up next, it's this one. I know it's definitely played out at this point, but the original Acqua Di Gio. There was nothing like it before, and it still sets the bar or the standard as the perfect summer fragrance. Literally summer in a bottle. The flankers that came after it are better in performance and originality to an extent, but the EDT should be on the fragrance Mount Rushmore. Yeah, we're talking designer fragrances. Acqua Di Gio has got to be on that Mount Rushmore. It's for sure one of the 4 most important fragrances for men, especially when you're talking these more modern summer freshies. It has that versatility, that compliment factor. That's one of the reasons everybody bought it. It's kind of like CK1, even with the color scheme of the bottles, like spitting image here. Perfumers as well. Yeah, Alberto Marias. But yeah, this one was like CK1, where it came out and just boom, it was everywhere. And here we are, decades later, Acqua Di Gio still going strong, still a bestseller, and then it has flankers coming out every single year that are also crushing it. Acqua Di Gio, yeah, that's a comfortable game changer, fragrance hall of fame type of scent. Waterboy 3153 is up next, who says, if we're talking all time, I'm going Bleu De Chanel. It birthed the whole blue fragrances that almost all houses have tried to get in on. This one was the top vote getter overall. Now, I said that the Jean Paul Gaultier over here had the most if you add up all the different comments, but the single comment by itself that had the most upvotes was Bleu De Chanel. I think for a lot of people, Bleu De Chanel maybe doesn't register as much as like a groundbreaking type of scent, because for a lot of people, they have in their mind, you know, they have it set that anything that's a blue fragrance automatically is not worthy of praise. I know a lot of people don't feel that way, to be fair, but there's a good amount that do. So that's how you end up with like Bleu De Chanel, Sauvage, Y, K, which I'm not a huge fan of, but K, Dylan Blue, all the others. They come out, and even though they do things in their own way within this same style, a lot of people will be like, oh, well, it's a blue scent, so therefore boring, which I don't agree with. I actually really enjoy blue fragrances, and I enjoy the different ways that these perfumers and brands approach blue fragrances. As far as being a groundbreaking scent, yeah, I'd say Bleu De Chanel pretty comfortably is, especially seeing everything that came out after this one. You know, people trying to get that Bleu De Chanel money. That's, I guess, the biggest way that you can measure success. If you do something and it's successful enough that everybody else starts kind of doing their own version of what you did, that shows that you're doing something right, and you definitely shook the market up. Nathaniel Alexander 2755 says, as much as I have obtained hundreds of different fragrances over the years, the most groundbreaking, unfortunately for some, would have to be Creed Aventus. Aventus. Never would have guessed that one. That thing was ahead of its time and was a compliment monster when I purchased it on my birthday. In one day, 14 compliments. Not to mention the numerous clones and inspirations based on it. Like it or not, it's a trailblazer. Yes, absolutely, no arguments there. The price has crept up more and more and more and more and more. Now we have a new Aventus flanker coming out, which is gonna be even more expensive than this one is nowadays, and that's kind of a tough sell. Just hate that, you know? Just inflation, Creedflation. But when you're talking about a fragrance that has had a massive impact, Aventus is like right there toward the top. Like you said, inspirations, clones, there are just insane numbers of those. Niche fragrances, actual clone brands, designer fragrances, indie fragrances, like everyone is making an Aventus type of fragrance. You can't escape it. And with the new one coming out, it's, you know, it's just gonna be more Aventus-y. The future is Aventus. Also the #1 selling niche fragrance for men as well. Now, all this said, yes, it can be tiring to hear about Aventus over and over again and Aventus style fragrances, but when you just take it on its nose, or your nose, it still smells really good. I love it. So played out to some, yes, still one of the most versatile compliment pulling fragrances ever. Stephen Cole, I don't know if I said that right, 97, Stronger With You seems to have inspired an abundance of similar style fragrances. You ain't wrong. Stronger With You is a really interesting one to me in a way. It's a successful line. It's not a failure, but it's not as big as lines like Bleu De Chanel or Acqua Di Gio or Le Male or something like that. But still, it's successful. But somehow it has become just as much of a fragrance that has its own style that's been emulated by other brands as some of the biggest ones ever made. Fragrances have gotten to the point that you can say a new scent is kind of Stronger With You-esque, and immediately everybody knows what you're talking about. Like for the longest time you could say, you know, this is kind of Invictus-y. It's got like an Invictus type vibe, and people would go, oh, okay, got it. I have an understanding of what you mean. Stronger With You is like that. And yet somehow it's like this creeping explosion of Stronger With You fragrances where it didn't just happen all at once, but it happened more and more and more and more and more, and then all of a sudden, oh, Stronger With You is its own style, and everybody has a Stronger With You scent now. So yeah, that one is like kind of an under the radar groundbreaker where you don't immediately realize that's what it is, but then later on you go, oh, that's where all this started, Stronger With You. Carla 1103 says, definitely Joop Homme. Released in a time where it was all about oak moss, still in production and still sold well. Masterpiece fragrance. Yeah, my favorite. So funny enough, actually yesterday, as of when I'm filming, a bunch of friends were over at the house here, and of course they started smelling some of the fragrances. And one of my friends brought this one up because he said he was at his job, and one of his coworkers walked by, and he stopped the guy and he was like, wait a second, are you wearing Joop? Joop, that's what everybody calls it, Joop. And the dude was like, yeah, I am. And it's that type of fragrance where even if you're not a fragrance person, if you know how this smells, you can pick that stuff out of a crowd instantaneously. So for what it's worth, actually, it is a really unique fragrance. Because to this day, like I said, you can easily pick that stuff up. You're not gonna really get that confused with much else out there. Yes, Mont Blanc Individuel smells a bit similar to that. Original Santal from Creed smells a bit similar to that. Oof. But that has its own vibe, man. It is affordable, it is powerful, it is sweet, almost cough syrupy, kind of sweet. And yes, I sprayed that for people that were here who maybe weren't as familiar with it. No, they weren't in love with it, but it still has its crowd. You know, people still wear that fragrance, they still rock it, people love it. I mean, some people love it. I don't like it at all, but yeah, it's kind of a groundbreaker. It was really different when it came out, to be fair. So it's kind of one of those deals like with CK1 where you judge it nowadays and maybe you go, oh, it's cheap and it smells dated and blah, blah, blah. But when it came out, it was something new, something different, something exciting. Last but not least, we have Wazoo, who says, I think it would have to be Drakkar Noir and Polo Green in the 80s. I don't know what that was. Sure, fragrances were around, that's definitely true. But the battle those two had was crazy. This is Chuck Liddell and Randy Couture right here. You know, classic matchup. You were either Team Drakkar or Team Polo. I like Polo too, honestly. I really think those two are what got people into fragrances more than any other. So for sure, these two massive, monstrous hits. For me, if I could only pick one, I'm gonna go with the Drakkar, but still, Polo Green is a scent that means a lot to me. And it smells good still to this day, I think. Yeah, it's sick. I love it. Both masculine fragrances, both pretty good bang for your buck, all things considered. I think the Polo is a bit more expensive, but still, I do like this. I keep going back to it. I'm still Team Drakkar, don't get me wrong. That pine in here, that green feeling mixing with leather is just really well done. One thing I will say is these Polo Green bottles have like some of the worst atomizers of all time. Oh God, they're awful. Ooh, that smells good though. But that does end us, I feel like, on a strong note with Drakkar Noir and Polo Green. Both ground shakers. And Drakkar Noir, you know, little similarity to Dior Sauvage Elixir. It feels almost like everything coming back around. So even as things change with fragrances, things that used to be popular that were no longer popular will become popular once again. It takes years, sometimes decades, but these things come back around. So some of these will eventually be not quite so exciting anymore, or not as popular anymore, I should say. And then maybe a decade or two goes by and things that are similar to them pop up again. I wanna thank you guys for hanging out with me. Thank you everyone that left a comment, everyone that voted. Stay safe out there, guys. See you tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you later.